Thank you for your attention. I brought 12 or 13 slides with me this evening, so I could, if I start getting excited and telling stories, I could turn that into an hour. And I know nobody's looking for that, so I'm going to try real hard to keep this real quick over just the next few minutes, because it really is nothing short of incredible how far we've made it in the last few years. Thanks so much to my employer, the City of Bristol, Tennessee, but also our friends group who Ed so rightfully patted on the back. I mean, this has been a joint effort of a lot of people, a lot of minds, a lot of knocking on doors. And so I'm just so thankful to be a part of this project and to work with all of these people, with Terry Napier, with the staff here at the Nature Center, with the friends, with Ed. This just truly is a special group of people. So just want to run through a few slides just to kind of remind you of where we have been, where we've come from, and then kind of end with these last two exhibits and the importance of those and why we chose what we chose. So just in case anyone needs the refresher, the Nature Center at Steel Creek Park, we are a education, research, and conservation facility where we educate, research, and conserve the Southern Appalachians, and especially the Ridge and Valley province of the Southern Appalachians. So yes, we are in the 2,300-acre Steel Creek Park, but we also tell stories that are beyond that space as well. There's a couple of important takeaways from this picture. I love this picture. I love these kids' late 70s, early 80s attire. This is the first Nature Center at Steel Creek Park. This was the Nature Hut, which was located where Shelter B is now. You can see there was a little bit like a carousel in the background here. There's two big takeaways here. The first is obvious, and that's it's easy to point to this Nature Hut in the 1970s that was open 2 hours a day, 3 days a week, and then compare that, contrast that to where we are now, and feel good about how far we've come. And yes, we have come a long distance. We've achieved a lot since those days. But there's another takeaway in that image as well that also shows the dedication to a nature program that the City of Bristol, Tennessee has had, that the group of people that would become the Friends of Steel Creek Nature Center and Park, there has been a desire and an appetite for a thriving nature program, at least all the way back to the 1970s. And so that is to the credit of this community that we're a part of. The original Nature Center, I love to tell this story and show these pictures, was built entirely by city hands, and much of it was, the timbers for the original Nature Center were hand-hewn in some cases, sawed in a makeshift sawmill up where our maintenance department is now. This particular tractor is, it's an okay picture of Alan Booker walking along a log. The funny subtext of that is that they blocked traffic for a couple of hours to get that log to form one of the timbers for the original Nature Center. I bet some of you have heard this story. Some of you were around when this was happening. Some of you new folks to the Friends may not know this, that in taxonomy, in paleontology, where I come from, we would use the phrase that the Chapel Bridge over Steel Creek is the sister species to the Nature Center. And what I mean by that is everybody has seen the pretty little Chapel Bridge over Steel Creek, and probably Harvey's hiked over it 1,000 times. What many of you might not have noticed is that the architecture on that gazebo is identical to the architecture of the original Nature Center. And it's not a coincidence. Remember I said it was city hands that built that original Nature Center? They needed to make sure that they understood and knew how to build this unique design. And so they needed a test run. They needed a beta version. And so they built a cute little frame and put a roof on it And that's now the gazebo that still stands over Steel Creek today. It's an identical architecture to what we have upstairs in the original Nature Center. So it opened to the public in 1995. We were 2,600 square feet. Very shortly after opening, we had Big Snappy. He came in 1996 and was a breakaway hit and the star of the show early on in the earliest days of the Nature Center. Fast forward to the hard work of this group of people. A few years later, in 2016, now suddenly the Nature Center has tripled in size. It is ADA accessible with an elevator. We now have 2 full floors of exhibits. And we literally designed the building. There's still Big Snappy poking his head in from the side. We designed that building with that snapping turtle in mind. We knew that we wanted him to be the first thing that visitors saw when they walked in the door. So a couple of important changes there, though. When I came here 17 years ago, Big Snappy was about half the size he is now, and he was in a 50-gallon aquarium. He's now grown a little bit, but his digs have too. He's now in a 300-gallon aquarium. So that will see him through comfortably for many, many, many more days before we have to upgrade again. So like Ed was talking about, like Robin and Sonny were talking about, this has been just an incredible project. And I'm so thankful to the genius of the design, and I don't use that word lightly, and the designer, Ed Hackley, that this project was started, it was designed, it was envisioned before our friends had achieved all of the budget necessary to create it. And so the design allowed for us to part and parcel exhibits based on this guiding document from the start. And so we were able to now offer this finished product. Well, finished. We're never really finished, are we? But we're now able to offer this complete Nature Center to you, to the public, to researchers, to conservation workers. And it doesn't look like it was added one exhibit at a time over the course of 6 years. It looks like there was a guiding intelligence along the entire way, and that's because there was. It wasn't a coincidence. So I'm so thankful to the work that Ed put in the beginning stages and then throughout every step of the way to help us achieve this reality. Yeah, we had to make some changes along the way. Fitting this sloth in that tiny little corner, that was something else. And we knew it was going to be tricky, didn't we, Ed? But we made it work. All right, so we're now here to have this open house because we've just completed the last 2 of the permanent exhibits, and that is that we have the giant ground sloth downstairs and we have the park after dark upstairs. So both of these exhibits are an interactive and special experience to all of our park visitors. The Park After Dark, this is a nice hodgepodge of some nocturnal creatures, a gnarly old Halloween tree, and then we even interpret a night sky on the ceiling of the Nature Center. This is truly a space where no square inch has gone to waste. Any space where we can turn into an educational opportunity, we've used that, including the ceiling of the Nature Center that's 40 feet off the floor, and they had to bring in specially contracted scissor lifts and a team out of Georgia to put this vinyl graphic on the ceiling. And it's not just a random assortment of fictional stars. It's an actual view of the night sky that is seasonally appropriate any time of the year. And there are even some real constellations that you can find. My favorite part about this is, and Ed will tell you, I had a couple of stipulations. So this mural on the ceiling really needs to be, some group of constellations that's not going to be obsolete in the winter or the summer. And I said, and the North Star needs to point north. And so Ed made sure to design that graphic in such a way that when you look into the north corner of the building, Polaris sits in that north corner. So the North Star actually does point north. The big guy, I intentionally did not put any bullet points on here because I knew I'd start getting excited and start telling sloth stories. And this is kind of funny, you know, half of the Nature Center are paleontologists by trade and by education. And 100% of the employees of the Nature Center love paleontology. So it seems kind of funny that our big showcase prehistoric creature would be the last exhibit that we did. But it's not entirely counterintuitive because this was one of those stories that, as much as I love it, as much as I'm biased for it, and I'll admit that straight away, I also knew that, you know, paleontology was not something that was ever going to get shorted by the Nature Center. I knew as long as I had breath in my lungs, I'd be telling fossil stories. And, you know, Lance is back here telling kids fossil stories, and Don's telling fossil stories. So this was one that I felt good that, okay, we need to prioritize some of these other exhibits on the front end, but still all the while knowing that ultimately we wanted this giant ground sloth. But we could have picked a whole number of prehistoric creatures to fill that cove. In fact, we could have picked one that would have fit the space a little bit more conveniently. We could have picked an Ice Age megafauna that would, you know, we didn't have to get creative with how we articulated the bones. But we knew we wanted to tell this giant ground sloth story because this is a truly incredible group of creatures. The ground sloths are part of the same group that include armadillos and anteaters and the tree sloths. So the giant ground sloths are true sloths, just like the three-toed and the two-toed sloths of Central and South America today. But as you can see from the big guy out there, they were different in some key ways. Much larger, for one thing. They didn't climb trees, as far as we know. Those would have to be some pretty hefty trees if they were doing that. And Megalonyx, especially Megalonyx jeffersonii, is a uniquely North American taxon. So that's one thing that makes him special to here. Sloths today are entirely Central and South American. Most of the giant ground sloths were Central and South American. Megalonyx, that is a North American species. It's also important because this is one of the creatures that helped kickstart the science of paleontology in North America. It's named for Thomas Jefferson, who was delivered the bones of the first specimen discovered and made some ideas on what it could have been. And so this created a national fervor that helped kickstart a whole science. But ultimately, why did we choose this species for our exhibit is because it has a fossil record from right here in Sullivan County. In fact, we have a few scrappy remains from immediately adjacent to the park. So this is a species. It's only recently extinct. They have fossils of giant ground sloths with human butcher marks on them, which tells us that early Americans actually coexisted and in some cases even ate these giant ground sloths. Maybe why there aren't giant ground sloths anymore. Maybe we ate them to extinction. Maybe not. Maybe it was climate change. I see Lance cringing back there as I say that. There's overkill or climate change. Everybody has a few different viewpoints on it. Yeah, this is a species that is very much a part of our Bristol natural history. And so a lot of people in our community don't even realize that there were giant ground sloths, much less that they were here, right here in their own backyard, and that we have a fossil record of them. So now, we don't have a complete articulated skeleton from Steel Creek Park, but that's okay. We have enough pieces and parts that we can identify those from Sullivan County, from Bristol, from near the park. So the giant ground sloth is it's a compelling character that really helps us tell these Nature Center natural history stories.